So I made a video a while back about how bad Wizards of the Coast is at writing, with Lost Mines of Phandelver as the primary example of why Wizards of the Coast is terrible at writing. Lost Mines of Phandelver is the adventure released in the starter set for 5th edition D&D. It is meant for people who are not only brand new for 5th edition, but also brand new to tabletop and D&D in general. And it is not a good adventure. And I made a whole portion of the video about how bad I think it is. And then I put that portion of the video on TikTok. Everyone in the YouTube comments seemed to agree with the points I had to make. Like 50% of the people on TikTok were disagreeing with what I had to say about Lost Mines of Phandelver. There were a lot of people who commented how good Lost Mines of Phandelver is, especially for new players, and oh, I ran it for my kids and they did fine. Some people even called me a bad DM. How could I be a bad DM? I have a YouTube channel. The point is, people seem to think that Lost Mines of Phandelver is a good adventure, which it very much isn't. And if you have something that you want to say, why don't you come up here and say it to my face? This whole video is going to be about how much Lost Mines of Phandelver sucks. But first, there are some assumptions that we are going to make. One, the players are going to be brand new players, people who are brand new to 5th edition, brand new to D&D, brand new to tabletop, and are using the pre-generated characters that came with the box set. They didn't make their own characters, they aren't min-maxed or anything like that, they don't have 20 in their primary ability, alright? These are the starter set characters. We're also going to assume the DM is not fudging any dice rolls. No trickery going on behind the screen, all the rolls are in front of the players. We're also not going to assume when a nat 20 or nat 1 happen. We're looking at what would happen if there were no crit successes and no crit fails. We are trying to boil this adventure down to pure design, the bare bones of it. So let's actually get started. This video's gone on for too long without me talking about the actual adventure. It starts with your characters being hired by this sketchy dwarf dude who says he has this opportunity of a lifetime. He gives you a mission to deliver this wagon over to this like frontier town. The players have no choice whether they want to do this or not. They just kind of end up doing it, and it's assumed that your character falls for whatever sketchy thing this dwarf has to say to you. And like most adventures with characters escorting a cart, they get ambushed. They get ambushed by goblins. There are clues left that the goblins ambushing them also ambush the sketchy dwarf dude that hired them. And this is where we get into goblins. Look, I love goblins. Goblins are one of my favorite villains to use in D&D. I throw goblins at my players all the time. The problem is when you're throwing them at these level 1 characters. Goblins, challenge rating 1/4, okay? Not too offensive. They could probably have a fair fight with a first level party, but if you consider how often these goblins are being used and also how powerful they are, let's cut to the whiteboard. I'm going to show you specifically why, mathematically why, goblins are really tricky for first level play. This is the math zone. Welcome to the math zone. We are going to be taking a look at the stats of the goblins and why they're so deadly against the first level characters. Don't worry, we're not going to be in the math zone for long. I just want to demonstrate something. Each goblin has an armor class of 15. The player characters, they have an average attack bonus of 5. So with the average d20 roll being 10.5, most of the time the player characters, not most of the time, but at least half the time, the player characters should be hitting the goblins. However, the goblins have this ability called, I think, Nimble Escape, which lets them stealth or hide as a bonus action. And given that a lot of the times the player characters are going to be fighting goblins in caves or forests, there's going to be a lot of foliage, a lot of places to hide behind. The goblins have a stealth of +6, and the average passive perception on the PC side is going to be 13. So the goblins, they have a higher chance of hiding from the player characters, since their stealth most of the time is going to be higher than the passive perception. I know that there's dice rolls involved and that anyone can roll anything, but we're just going to look at the flat math of this. If the goblins roll average on stealth, they are going to beat the PCs rolling average on their perception. This means if the goblins are going to be successful in stealthing against the player characters, then the goblins are going to be hit much less. In fact, their attacks are going to do more against the PCs. Let's take a look at that. The average goblin to hit is going to be +4 with an average damage of 5. If you take a look at the average armor class of the PCs, it ranges from, I think the highest is 18 and the lowest is a 12. There's 1, 16, and then there's a couple 14s in there. They all have an average hit points of like, I think it's 12 to 8. So it's gonna take at least 2, maybe 3 hits from these goblins to drop a first level player character. However, since their stealth is going to be higher than the passive perception, the goblins are going to be getting some kind of advantage from being stealth, from being an unseen enemy. And advantage, in dice terms, is equivalent to a +5. So we can add that to the goblin's attack bonus, so that's a +4 attack bonus and a +5 from advantage. That equals a +9 to hit. If we take the average of the 10.5 dice rolls that we're getting from the d20, that's going to be an average to hit of 19 to 20, which greatly surpasses all of the armor classes from the player characters. And given that goblins can use hide as a bonus action, they will be able to, most of the time, get this advantage, get that +9 to hit. Well, not a +9, but an equivalent of a +9, and they are going to be dealing the 5 points of damage and chipping away at the player characters. Now, 5 damage is not that bad for one player character. However, when you look at the adventure and you see how many goblins there are, their strength is going to come through numbers. If the goblins just use the abilities that they have, the nimble escape ability, they're going to be able to avoid most of the damage that the PCs are going to do while dealing a lot of damage themselves. If you get a lot of goblins, like let's say 4 to 6 goblins who are all stealthing, they are going to be able to outmatch a level 1 party. And if you're going to have a bunch of encounters with 4 to 6 goblins, you're going to be draining all of the resources, all of the hit points, all of the spell slots that the player characters have available to them. You're back already. So we have goblins as a primary enemy of at least the first chapter of the game. We start out with the ambush. The players could probably take a 4 goblin ambush. The 4 goblin ambush is not what I think is deadly. What I do think is deadly is having encounter after encounter. The more encounters you have with these goblins, the more you're draining the character's spell slots, the more you're draining their class abilities, the more you're draining their hit points. There's not a lot of opportunities for these characters to rest, all right? They're in the middle of the woods or in the middle of a cave. They can't just sit down and take a nap. This also brings me to the cognitive dissonance of Lost Mines of Phandelver, at least for the first chapter. The players, once they finish the ambush, it is assumed that they're going to track down the goblin hideout, but they also have a cart that they were paid to protect. You know, the cart that they were forced to be paid to protect. That is their one job, is to protect this cart. And in order to track down where the goblin's hideout is, they're going to have to leave the cart behind. The cart that they are paid to protect, they are going to leave behind in goblin bandit infested woods. Whenever I've run this game, this is normally when my players have decided, okay, how about we have half the party go track down the goblins and the other half stay and guard the cart, which makes sense. You want to track down the goblins, but you also don't want to leave your cart undefended. That's your job, is to protect the cart. Unless your character has like a vendetta against all goblin kind, why would they want to leave the cart to go track the goblins down? And there ain't no way that you're gonna take that bull-driven cart through the woods, especially since the woods are trapped on the way to the goblin hideout. There are pits, there are snares. I'm not against having traps, I'm just saying, what are the characters going to do with this cart? Imagine if your DoorDash driver got mugged, and after the DoorDash driver fought off the muggers, followed them back to their house and fought the entire gang that tried to mug them. And they just left your order in the middle of the street. Okay, let's just assume that the players have enough cognitive dissonance to leave the cart behind so we can continue on with the adventure, why don't we? It's time for baby's first dungeon, yay! It is a Goblin Cave! Goblin Cave, classic, of course. Let's go through room by room what the different encounters are. The first encounter we have is a lookout. It's goblins that are sort of hidden in these thickets, but the adventure says that they are asleep, so the players have to be not stealthy in order to wake up the goblins. 2 of the 5 pre-generated characters have heavy armor, so that's going to be a little difficult. They're probably going to have to fight these goblins, but it's 2 goblins. It's not too bad. Inside of the cave are a bunch of wolves that are chained up to stalagmites that are like snarling at the players. The players can just make an animal handling check to calm the wolves down, which I appreciate that the module gives you the DC for the animal handling check every time players see an enemy that is some kind of animal. They're going to try to tame it, so I appreciate that bit. That's a good bit. From there, the characters characters lead deeper into the cave, it gets pretty dark. The characters are probably gonna have to create some sort of source of light, like a torch or the light cantrip. It's very difficult for these characters to stealth through unless you're just sending the rogue ahead, or you can't even send the rogue ahead. They don't have dark vision. Wait, you'd have to send like the wizard ahead in order to like properly scout the whole dungeon ahead, because there's also a goblin that's hiding on an overpass, and if the goblin spots the characters, then they're going to set off the flood trap. I really like the flood trap. I think it's a pretty neat goblin thing to do to sort of weaponize a natural waterfall. This is me complimenting the adventure. I don't like how they're throwing this at first level characters. I don't think the characters need to be losing more hit points, even if it's just a D6. Does make the adventure a little bit more interesting though. After that, there is a bit of a fork in the road, but I'm just going to go in order that the adventure has it written. So I assume that they're going to be going into the Goblin Den, which has 6 goblins. That for sure outnumbers how many players you have. That action economy is very much in their favor, especially since one of those goblins is a super goblin with 5 extra hit points. Let me tell you, 5 hit points doesn't sound like a lot, but every hit point counts when it comes to these first level adventures. We already went over why goblins are deadly for first level characters. Now you are outnumbering them with goblins. The goblin with the extra hit points is named. His name is Yemek. He really wants their bugbear chieftain Clarg to die so he can take over as chieftain of the tribe, or at least this part of the tribe, this hideout. He wants to be in charge. He says to the players, if they go kill the main boss, then he will let go of this human hostage, which I don't know if the players are going to remember the NPC that was mentioned once in the blurb at the very beginning. Who's to say? Let's just assume that the players are going to agree to this because the adventure does. At this point, the players have to turn around. They have to fight some more goblins, and then that's when we get to the final boss fight. Oh boy, the final boss fight. The final boss in this dungeon is not only one bugbear, but also the bugbear's pet wolf, and also 2 goblin minions on top of that. I plugged this encounter into D&D Beyond's Encounter Builder, which is just a digital version of the encounter designer from the DMG, and I got this. You see that where it says deadly? That's not good. That means with a party of 5 first level characters that have all their hit points, all of their resources, this encounter is still very likely to kill at least 1 PC. And the players are coming into this after 1 ambush, maybe fighting wolves, maybe getting hit by the flood, fighting that den full of goblins, and also the 3 other goblins in front of this room. They're probably very low on hit points, probably fresh out of spell slots, and they have to fight a deadly encounter. And when I say deadly, I mean deadly. This bugbear packs a punch. The average damage from this bugbear could one-shot a player character. On top of that, their armor class is higher than the other goblins. Also, that's a lot of hit points. The players are doing like maybe 5 damage on average, 6, 7 damage. That's gonna take quite a few rounds to kill them. On top of that, you have the pet wolf with pack tactics. If the bugbear is within 5 feet of any character, that wolf gets advantage on said character. And then on top of that, you have those 2 goblin minions that are probably just sort of in the back, picking off other PCs with bow and arrows. If they were just fighting 1 bugbear, maybe a bugbear with a wolf, I would say the player characters would have a really good chance. But 4 enemies versus the rest of the party that's already drained on hit points, already drained on spell slots, that's a TPK. Easily a TPK. Action economy is really important when you're designing a low level adventure. I would say it's even more important than CR. I would rather start a new group of players out with fighting 1 enemy that's maybe CR 1, 2, maybe even CR 3, than have a horde of goblins fight them. Let's say, against all odds, the players defeat the bugbear, they defeat the goblins, defeat the bugbear's pet wolf, they loot the bugbear's room, and then they go back to collect their hostage. Of course, goblins, not to be trusted, they still demand a ransom. Quick question, why don't the remaining goblins just kill off the rest of the players? Probably really beaten up after that final fight with Clarg. I mean, if they couldn't kill Clarg, they would probably think that the players are very much damaged. Why don't the remaining goblins just cut off the loose ends, kill off the other players? Not the other players, the other characters, you know what I mean. And this is just chapter 1. This video is only going to be about chapter 1 because I'm assuming this is going to be many players' introduction to 5th edition D&D, which involves having to ignore the main quest that you were supposed to do, fight off very difficult enemies, and also most likely get involved in the TPK. But I don't want to just say this is bad and you should think it's bad. That's not very helpful. I'm going to give you some alternatives. If you want to run a more dungeon crawly adventure, if you really like the combat in the dungeons, I recommend the Sunless Citadel. That one is in Tales of the Yawning Portal. It's the first adventure in there. The story is actually pretty good. There is good ramp up with the enemies. It starts with giant rats, and that becomes kobolds, and those kobolds become goblins. It's a much better escalation than just throwing goblins at the players. I also recommend XP to Level 3's Questonomicon. It's a third-party creator. They wrote Questonomicon with this specific problem in mind, with having boring first level sort of tutorial missions. There are so many better resources than the Lost Mines of Phandelver. Or you could join my Patreon and I'll run D&D for you. I have a D&D campaign on my Patreon that I run through the Discord server. These are all the patrons right here. They're super cool. I've been running D&D for them for the past couple of months, and it's been a really fun adventure. Everyone seems to be having a lot of fun. I'm having a lot of fun running it. I recommend it if you're just looking to play some games of D&D online. If you don't want to give me money on Patreon, but you still want to support the channel, go ahead and subscribe. I'm going to be posting more videos like this. I got a lot of good ones coming up. Like this one, like this video right here that you should watch now that this video is over. This is a pretty good video. I'm a huge fan of this, so you should click on it and it'll be a great time.